All right, hello everyone. I'm going to be going over how to make a simple creature in Blender. So first of all, I'm just going to do a little bit of reorganization. If I right click over on Scene Collection at the top, I can make a new collection. And I always like to name things descriptively. It makes it easier to reuse things later on. And I'm going to keep the cube this time, but I'm going to be moving it to my creature collection instead of the default collection with the camera and the light. I like to keep those separate so that I can temporarily toggle them off when I don't actually need to use them. And I'm going to give the mesh object itself a descriptive name. And my creature is going to be called Harry, so that's the name I'm going to go with. You can go with whatever you want. All right. So I have my initial setup here, and I'm going to go over into edit mode. I can either press the tab key or use the little drop down over here. And the first thing that I want to do is add a little bit of subdivision. Now I do want to remind you that in preferences under key map, you should have right click to select. All of the shortcuts that I go over, a lot of them actually are going to be based on this key map with right click to select, so it'll be harder to follow the tutorial if you don't. So first of all, W to enter the specials menu. I'm going to subdivide, and if we expand the little subdivide drop down over here, I can change the number of cuts. And in this case, I'm going to set the number of cuts to 3. Now, I want this is going to be the body of my creature, sort of the torso area and going into the head, but I want this just to be a little bit more rounded. So I'm going to select each corner, and I can use Option right click when I'm selecting the corner to grab it. And I'm just going to use the Move tool to slide the corners a little bit inward along the X and Y axis. Option right click to select a corner, and then just dragging that corner a little bit inward just to make that a little bit more rounded. I'm going to do that on the other sides. Option right click, pulling it along X and Y to round this out. Option right click, X and Y. Oh, and I do want to be careful to make sure that I actually have the little arrow selected. There we go. All right, so just a little bit more rounded than it was by default. Now I also want to make the top a lot more rounded. So I'm going to grab that vertex in the middle. Notice I have vertex select. We have the 3 different selection options. So vertex select. And I'm going to turn on proportional editing. Now, proportional editing has several types of fall off over here, which will give you very different effects. I'm going to leave this on smooth, but you can certainly experiment with the other options. And so when I pull the handle up, notice there is this circle. And if I drag on the mouse before I let go, I can actually change how much is moving as I'm moving this one vertex. So I can play around with how much I want to pull this up, but I just want to end up with something that's more rounded, and the exact thing you end up with is sort of up to you. All right, so that looks good for now. Next up, I'm going to switch to face select, and I'm going to select my faces on the bottom edge over here that I want to make up the legs. So probably these faces right here. I'm going to turn off proportional editing for now, but E to extrude, and I can go down however far I want to go. Maybe something like this. I might press S to scale just a little bit inward, E to extrude a second time. Okay, now I'm going to extrude one last time, and this is going to be sort of the foot area. So I have the upper leg, the lower leg, and the feet. I'm going to just switch from face select to edge select. I'm just going to select the very front edge, and I'm just going to slide that a little bit forward. If I want to adjust the back edges, I can, but maybe something like this. And I'm also going to adjust the silhouette of the belly, have it a little less boxy. So option right click to select that whole edge. I might pull it a little bit inward. It might go a little bit up. Can sort of experiment with what I like the look of, perhaps something like this. And I'll do something similar on the back. Option right click to select that loop. Might go a little bit inward. Maybe it'll go higher up. Maybe it'll be lower down. Maybe it'll be about the same. Matter of personal preference. But I just want to get a silhouette that feels just a little bit more natural. All right, I'm going to switch back to Vertex Select. And I want to have a little bit more detail here so that I can have actually a face, some arms with the amount of detail that I want. So this tool right over here is the Loop Cut tool. Just a reminder, you can always expand out the tools so that you can see what they're called while you're just getting started. And when I hover over the different areas, it'll allow me to add either a horizontal or vertical loop. So I just want to add a couple of loops in some strategic places. I'm going to add maybe one over here and over here. This is going to be for my eye area. Maybe I'll have one over here. And I'm going to add a couple of loops for a mouth area. I don't know, maybe something like that. And as soon as I'm done adding loops, I want to get out of that tool so that I don't unintentionally add them later on. And I'm just going to, actually, I think I need one last loop. I'm going to just add one over here. All right, there we go. So I'm going to adjust the vertices over here to create an area for an eye. I can press S to scale just a little bit more inward, or I could use the move tool to move these individually, depending on what I like the look of. But something like that I think looks pretty good. Again, I can adjust them on an individual basis if that's something that I want, but I'm just going to shift right click to select multiple faces. I'm going to press E to extrude them inward, and I'm going to do this twice. This way, if I want to have some eyelids later on, I have some geometry to give me a starting point for that. So the first time I'm just extruding a little bit. The second time I'm going to go further back. I do want to be careful not to go too far. I just want to have a little bit of depth there. And if I realize, oh, didn't quite go as far as I want, or maybe I went too far, I can always use the move tool to make some adjustments. But maybe like that. So that's going to be the eye socket. I'll add an actual eye later on. Back to Vertex Select. And I want to adjust the faces over here, or the vertices over here, to create whatever I want the outline of my mouth to be. And so it might be a matter of moving individual vertices. I might do something similar to what I did for the eye, where I scale several of them. Matter of personal preference, what this is going to end up looking like. So I don't know, maybe something like that. And I'm going to just select those faces. I'm only going to worry about the right side because I'm going to actually get rid of the left side later on. So E to extrude. Again, I'm going to do this in a couple of stages, so just a little ways the first time. That way, if I want some geometry for lips later on, I can have it. And E a second time for the actual cavity of the mouth. All right, so there we go. Next up, I'm going to be getting the arm ready. So if I feel like I need additional geometry for where I want the arm to go, this would be a good time to add another loop cut, or I can just take the geometry that I have and make some adjustments to it. I might grab these 4 vertices, shift right click, S to scale them a little bit more inward. Something that's interesting that you can do is press GG and just slide along the vertices, so sometimes that can be helpful. But I just want to get whatever I want the starting silhouette for the arm. And I'm going to shift right click to select all the faces that are going to make up the arm. E to extrude. I'm going to go about to the elbow area, wherever that's going to be. Maybe S to scale that a little bit down at some point. E to extrude the lower arm. I might scale that down as well, so S to scale. So something like that. I'll be adding a hand, but I'll add it separately just so that you can see what that process would be like. All right, now at this stage, I want to delete half of the body so that I can use the mirror modifier to make the other side completely symmetrical, which is something that's super helpful. Now, if I switch it to wireframe, I can either click on the icon over here, or I can press Z and switch to wireframe that way. And I want to make sure that I'm looking straight on. So you can press 1 on the number pad to go to the front view, or you can use the widget over on the top. Looks like mine is actually turned to the side. That's okay. I can make this work anyway. All right, so I'm just going to use B for box select to click and drag to select an area. Now, depending on whether I'm looking at the faces or the vertices and how far I've selected over, I might want to do this slightly differently. Because I have the vertices in the middle selected, when I press X to delete, I don't want to delete the vertices. I want to delete the faces. Now, if I was selecting this far and not selecting the middle, then I would want to be deleting the vertices. It's just all about what you have selected. We just want to make sure that the middle stays active. I'm going to head over to the wrench icon for the modifiers, add modifier, and I'm going to search for mirror. And in my case, my object's gotten turned around. So I can either fix the rotation or I can change which axis I'm actually mirroring. I'm going to leave this with the x-axis and I'm just going to fix the rotation really quick. So back in object mode, I'm just going to press R to rotate, Z for the z-axis, and 90 degrees. So now when I head over into the front view, you'll notice that it's still not mirroring properly. It's because I actually need to apply that change. It's not recognizing it as the actual rotation. So Control A for the apply menu. I'm going to apply the rotation. And now when I take a look, it's actually mirroring properly as I expected to. All right, there we go. So 2 ways that we can correct the direction if we need to. It is always a good idea when you're creating your model to make sure that the front side is facing front, because if you end up reusing it in other sources later on, like Godot or something else, it'll make it a lot easier if it's already facing the correct direction. All right, so I do want to mention sometimes you might end up with extra geometry that you want to go through and delete. So I have these extra faces right here. I'm just going to select them both. X, I'm going to delete those faces. That gets rid of those just weird planes that are in the middle of the mouth. All right, so that looks good. Something else, sometimes you might end up with little gaps in where the mirror is. So I'm just going to select the mesh for a moment and pull it off to the side. Notice that the mirror is based on the origin of the object. So the closer this gets to the origin, the more the gap fills in. If I have a little bit of a gap and I don't want to move it closer together, I can come over to the merge distance and just increase the number right there, and that will just make it join together. Or if there are parts of the mesh that aren't joining but parts are, then I just want to actually adjust the individual vertices so that they join together where they should. So a few different ways that we can make corrections there. All right, so I have most of the body all set here. I'm going to leave the mirror modifier and I'm going to add a subdivision surface modifier just to smooth out the body a little bit, get this a little bit more rounded here. Now we have a few different settings that we can mess with, like I can change it to simple or the more complex. We have the viewport and the render values over here. So this is just what it looks like when we're testing things out. The render is what the final output is going to be. People will often put the viewport to a lower number just so that there'll be less processing, but you can increase it to see what it would actually look like at some different values. Recommend not going overboard with the amount of subdivision surface because it'll really increase the processing. All right, so from here, I could also come over to the face menu and I can shade smooth and shade flat, and that's based on the faces that are selected. So I can be really strategic about what areas are smooth and what areas are flat, and it's using shade flat by default. There's also a shade auto smooth, which adjusts the smoothness based on the angle, or I can just make the whole thing shade smooth. So the combination of shade smooth with the subdivision surface modifier really smooths things out. So that looks a lot smoother than it was before, but that's really a matter of personal preference, how far you go. All right, so that's looking pretty good. I'm going to add a hand, and I'm specifically going to add it as its own object just to show the process of joining things together. I'm going to move the pivot point off to the side so that when I use Shift A for the add menu under mesh, I'm going to add another cube. Now, the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm just going to use the scale tool to get this to be about the scale that I actually want the hand to be. So I don't want it to be crazy big, and maybe a little bit thinner. So maybe something like that. And I'm going to deliberately leave some space over here. When I'm lining up the hand, I can always go back into quad view. Control Option Q toggles you in and out. And this is really helpful because you can see from multiple angles if something is in the right place or not. So I can play around with that over there and just Control Option Q to get back out. So I'm deliberately leaving some space, and now that I have the general size the way that I want it, I'm going to press Tab to go back into edit mode, W to subdivide, and I'm just, actually I'm going to have 2 cuts here, I think, so something like that. And I'm going to start out just by making this into a mitten hand. I'm not going to go too complicated with lots of fingers and things just to save a little bit of time. But I'm going to start just by rounding it out a little bit like we did for the torso at the start. So along the Y and X axis, just grabbing most of the corners and making them just a little bit rounder. Option right click, grabbing on the X and Y axis, getting that a little bit round. Option right click, in this case maybe just the Y axis, and the same over here. So option right click and just adjusting that Y axis to get a little bit rounded. I'm going to switch to face select, and I'm going to select all of these faces on the end here to make a thumb. So just shift right click to select multiple, E to extrude, and then S to scale a little bit inward. Sometimes when you extrude, it locks to an angle that you may not want. Don't worry about it because you can always just adjust that angle after the extrusion is done. And like if I decide, oh, that thumb's a little bit too far out, I can play around with that. But something like that for the hand. Now, the hand is going to get joined to the arm, but I need it actually to be hollow to be able to join it correctly. So I'm going to select all of these faces that are in the wrist area where the hand is going to join. And I'm just going to select all of those. Shift right click to select multiple. X, and I'm deleting the faces. I'm going to head back into object mode, and I'm actually going to delete the faces on the wrist on the body as well. So tab to go into edit mode. I'm just going to select all of those faces, shift right click, X to delete, and I'm deleting the faces. All right. Now this time, when I join these together, I'm going to actually join them into a single object without using a modifier. So I want to be strategic about the order that I select when I'm doing this. If I hold down on Shift when I have the hand selected and select the body, notice that the outline color changes, so the body is the active selection right now. And that's the order that I want. I want to select the hand first, just with a right click, and then Shift right click to select the body. And when I press Control J to join, it joins them together into a single object, and it keeps any modifiers that the active selection had, and that's why the order matters. So that's going to round things out really nicely. Now, temporarily, I'm going to turn off the visibility of the subdivision surface modifier because it's going to make the final steps of unifying the hand to the body a little bit easier. So I'm going to go back into edit mode and vertex select, and I'm going to slide the hand a little bit closer. When you have multiple mesh objects inside a single object, you can hover over an individual object and just press L for loose part, and it allows you to select just that area. And I'm going to slide this just a little bit closer together, but not completely together. I want to have enough room to be able to see where the different vertices are. And I'm going to join the vertices themselves together. If you join an object and end up not having the vertices joined together, when you're animating it later on, you might end up with issues with things sticking out in weird ways that you don't want. It's better to actually join the vertices together instead of just sticking them so that they're intersecting. So I'm going to select a vertex on the hand, shift right click to select a vertex on the arm, and then I'm going to press M for the merge menu, and you'll see there are several options here. It doesn't really matter what you choose as long as you have some sort of system. I'm going to merge it last, and that's just going to merge to the last selected vertex. So if I come over here, shift right click, select another vertex, M to merge, and at last. And I'm just going to continue that process. So that's option 1 for joining the vertices together. Option 2 is to turn on snapping with the little magnet icon over here, but I just want to change the increment from increment to vertex. And so now when I grab one of the vertices just with G, it's going to sort of snap to where the other vertices are. Now, if your hand and your arm have a different number of vertices, you may end up merging multiple vertices together, and that is okay. It will end up creating n-gons, so there are certain tools that might not end up working properly, but they're not things that we should need at this stage. So I just want to make sure that everything gets joined together. And I'm just going to undo that. I think I'm going to do the other option. So shift right click to select multiple, M, joining at last. And I have just a couple left, M, at last. Shift right click, M, at last. And one last one here. There we go. Now, depending on which method you use to join together, merging or using snapping, you may end up with multiple vertices at a single spot. And you need to get rid of them because when you have multiple vertices overlapping each other perfectly, it can just cause weird issues, especially with the materials, but with some other things later on as well. So A to select everything, M to merge, and this time I'm going to merge by distance. And you'll notice it removed 6 vertices. So those were the ones where I used snapping and they ended up on top of each other. So that got rid of anything that was perfectly overlapping. You'll notice there's this merge by distance window. You can increase the merge distance a little bit if you need to, but in this case we shouldn't need to because it should just be the ones that are overlapping perfectly. All right, there we go. That is completely joined together now. I'm going to switch back into object mode. Take a look at that. All right. And if I want to at this stage, I can turn my subdivision surface modifier visibility back on. Looks much better that way. Now I'm going to be adding some eyes, and I'm going to be adding them as separate objects instead of as an object inside the creature mesh. And the reason for that is it's going to be easier to animate the eyes later on if I choose to animate them if they are separate objects. So I'm going to just move my pivot point into one of my eye sockets, Shift A for the add menu, and I'm going to add a UV sphere. Now this UV sphere is way too big by default, so I'm just going to press S to scale that down. And I just want to choose a size that's sort of going to fit in the eye socket. I may need to adjust the location, so I can use the move tool to do that. And I can play around with the exact size that I think looks right. I'm going to take a moment to name this. Now this is the right side, so I'm just going to add .r to the end of the name. When we're working with the left and right side of the body, a standard naming strategy is to add a .l or a .r to the end of the name. And there are some features that when things are named that way, it'll make some automatic features work better in the future. I'm going to duplicate the eye, and I'm just going to press, so that's Shift D to duplicate. Then I'm just going to press X to lock that to the X axis when I'm moving it, and about there. And I'm just going to take a moment to rename. It's just double clicking on the name to be able to change it to I.L. And that gives me the body of my creature. So I'll be back with another video later for dealing with materials, but hopefully that is enough to get you started.